Spencer Tillman. Great to see you, and how are you?
Oh, I don't mean to brag, but I'm doing all right, man. How are you holding up?
I'm doing great.
Good,
So
good.
I have to ask you, because you did play a lot of football
Right,
here.
right.
When I came here, my boss in Philly told me I had to go to an In-N-Out burger.
Oh, yeah?
And I went last night, and I was so disappointed.
You know,
with it.
listen, I will concede this. I'm an analyst. I say what I see. Not the hugest, big In-N-Out guy, okay? There are a couple of places. There's one called Goldie's Bar and Grill in Oklahoma in the southwest region that's pretty darn good. There's a couple of holes in New York City that I think that are comparable, if not better. I get you, but it's a region. It's marketing. It's like VHS and beta, right? You know, which one is better, that kind of thing. It's all up to marketing. It's regional. We take pride in that. But, yeah, that's a good point.
So you basically run San Francisco, I'll say. Where is the one place Spencer Tillman goes that we have to try before we go back home?
Well, there was
to
a
Philly?
restaurant called Tommy Toys. If you're familiar with that, the folks that are around here knows that Tommy Toys. The Vans is another one, not too far from here. Marin County. Those are a couple of places. You got to have got to know somebody to get in them. But they're great places to go to and have a nice bite.
So what you're telling me is that you're going to call up after this interview and you're going to say, "Can I get a table of two?" And you could join us if you want as well.
Absolutely. You come on, have a blast and party, and let them know I sent you. They'll treat you well.
So we're in anti-Chip Kelly territory here in Philadelphia. How was he perceived when they introduced him as the head coach?
Listen, I'm a 49er. I'm not a big-time Chip Kelly guy. Not a big-time Chip Kelly guy. I think he's going to be a mistake as a professional coach because he doesn't understand the millennial cohort. You can't treat them like you do the college kids, and they're on the cusp too. Anybody born after 80 and between 2000 is technically a millennial. But to me, he lacks the sensitivity, the ability to connect to the human condition. He is a drone, in my opinion, and those are very pointed comments, but I've been around the game long enough to know it when I see it, and to me he's not good for the game.
You know what's so interesting, just being in Philly and being able to cover Chip these last few years and talk to some of the players, it just came off to me that Chip was very arrogant.
He was arrogant.
And he was stubborn,
Yep.
and he would not change his ways. His goal line play calling was just atrocious in Philly. Do you have any confidence whatsoever that maybe that experience in Philly humbles him and now he changes here in San Fran?
Well, the only thing that humbles somebody is if there's a significant enough time between what they did wrong and then the next opportunity that they have. This was relatively a short window, and he's almost being honored for it. And I feel bad because of the Camelot era that we grew up in playing here in San Francisco was one that's deserving of more. And you cannot necessarily ascribe or assume that someone's going to be successful, particularly after they failed at Philadelphia and then come to a venerable, at least during the years when I played, San Francisco 49er franchise that has such a rich legacy. I don't think this is a good thing.
Are fans tired with Colin Kaepernick? Is that done, you think, that chapter in San Francisco 49er
I think
history?
the experiment, you hear leakage out there that he wants to go somewhere else and where he's naming where he wants to go and all of that. I think that's problematic. It's an issue. Because we do live in a world of images and impression, and once someone declares or willing to go on record and say these types of things, then you got to question where their heart is. And so we're not mercenaries, despite the fact that we're full-fledged in the free agency era. People do appreciate some sense of loyalty and confidence in being committed to an institution, and those words are not heard as frequently as they should be in this era of the game.
That fall from grace is just something so compelling to me because you see what Colin Kaepernick did. I believe it was against the Packers where he ran all over the field and put up 200 yards, then gets to the Super Bowl. They have the blackout in the Super Bowl, almost wins the Super Bowl. Him and, who was it, Michael Crabtree, couldn't hook up on that final play. How did this guy go from being the toast of this city to now let's get him out of here?
I think a lot of it has to do with coaches, and here's why. I mean, if you take Cam Newton and look at the continuity that they've had there at quarterback, or Dorsey and the quarterback as coach, they've had that continuity in a relatively short period of time. They've been able to quarterback that in terms of skill set. He's not as – he's much bigger, obviously, than Kaepernick, but in terms of unorthodox as juxtaposed to what the pro game is all about historically, he's a mobile quarterback, can move around, got pretty good accuracy, all of that stuff. Cam Newton has it, and Kaepernick has that. Again, physically different specimens, and one is 6'5" and 257. So they both got great height there, but one weighs a lot more. I think the fact that you have coaches that understand that skill set and coach within that dynamic. Zone read still a big part of his game, as it was at Blinn College, as it was at Auburn. That consistency is what gives him the confidence. You don't buck the trend. The late Bobby Dodd used to say that all the time. People try to buck the trend and change things, and that's what you don't want to do. You want to use the skill set that the player has to their advantage. And I think coaching at its core is being able to do that. Even if you've never done it before, you can hire people to come in and consultants and say, hey, look, how do you do the zone scheme? How do you do this? Let's coach it up right. That's what a true coach can do. You can take anybody. If you're a coach, and you can coach anything once you see what they're doing.
Spencer Tillman is here with us live at Radio Row at the Moscone Center. Zach Gelb, WHIP Radio, broadcasting to you in Philadelphia. You played with Joe Montana. You were a co-captain for him in that Super Bowl where they defeated the Broncos and John Elway. Describe what it was like to be in the huddle and to see Joe Montana play.
Oh, it was great. I mean, he was crazy. He's one of those nondescript kind of leaders. He leads through humor and through his ability on the football field. When you see him, one time he threw a swing pass to me, and I know he never looked at me, but he was still controlling the flow of what was happening in the game because he looked at and saw where the dominant players were, and just by counting and taking a mental snapshot, he knows that they were short a defender to the backside. And so he did his steps, 1, 2, 3. I was on a scat release, and he turned. The ball was on its way out before his head fully turned around. And I'm saying to myself, this guy is brilliant. He absolutely knows it. But that distance or that commitment not to look was the difference between that linebacker playing me and then honoring the play side that he was motioning to and me sprinting the opposite direction. Had Joe looked, he would have committed to me a lot sooner. Okay, so just understanding and having that kind of command not to give a key or read to that linebacker by not moving your head is something that's phenomenal. We see it more recently in this era with Peyton Manning. He was to the game what Joe Montana was earlier. He's at a different level. Intellectual, guys with bigger arms, yes, but in terms of football acumen, very few played the game that level.
Is he the greatest quarterback of all time?
To me, he is. And again, I know that Brady has done a tremendous amount, but Brady has done a tremendous amount with a lot of complementary parts around him, and so has Montana. That would be the fairest thing to say. But I just believe that during that era, the coach that was at the helm coaching, just brilliant. And again, I'm not taking anything away from Belichick at all. I just believe that Joe was with less more than any other quarterback that's been out there.
What would it take you to change that opinion that Montana isn't the greatest quarterback of all time?
Maybe another Super Bowl or two by Brady. I mean, and again, Super Bowl is not the end game that you say that this is the quintessential reason why you do it. It can be a tiebreaker, no question about that. But I look at how players were made better around you as a result of him. And again, that argument can be made for Brady too. But when they're not as good, and then you can't make it to the big game like Brady couldn't this year, they were depleted offensively. They didn't have a lot of weapons besides Gronk and Edelman. They were down. They were shorthanded. So that they were exposed a little bit ultimately, and he was tagged a bunch, in the route up here. So that shows you that they were lacking some tools. Would Joe Montana have been subject to the same thing? Probably, but maybe not to the same extent, because of the brilliance that was the late Bob McKittrick coaching on the offensive line. All of those guys, they were just brilliant players,
It's such a fun argument because you saw what Brady did in his first 3 Super Bowls with guys like David Patton, David Givens, and Troy Brown was also a really special player. But it's amazing how those guys find a way to win no matter what the circumstances are.
And that's what great players do. Belichick has this saying, just do your job. If you're
do your job well, as he likes to point out.
Do your job well. Do your job well. If you're Malcolm Butler and you've seen the Twins formation come to your side and you don't drive on that pass, you don't deny Seattle an opportunity to win a Super Bowl back-to-back. But it's because of that recognition in the game, got a good jam on that inside receiver, and then he jumped the route, claimed the ball as his own, even though there was a bump there. That kind of commitment as a result of film and recognition is doing your job well. An undrafted free agent out of West Alabama can be a hero, and I call it the element of recency. What you see last, you remember most. Everybody's going to remember that play. I mean, if he does nothing else in his career, that play right there will be the one that sends him to another level.
And he's turned out to be a pretty darn good player going to the Pro Bowl this year.
Yes,
although he didn't really go. Why do guys no longer like the Pro Bowl?
Maybe because it's not really the Pro Bowl. I mean, it looks more like in Oklahoma parlance, a red and white game where there's no tackling in that. And maybe I understand why you wouldn't want to do that, but it is a joke.
If you had a depth chart, I feel like I'm looking back at a college depth chart. You have like the 7 deeps now that end up playing in the game.
Exactly.
Just announce the team and then don't play the game.
Don't play it because that way it gives some integrity, because guys are going to be arguing 60, 70 years down the road. I made the Pro Bowl. I went to the Pro Bowl.
Hey, you didn't really make the Pro Bowl like what it was back in the day.
But you didn't make it. You weren't elected to it. It just creates another argument.
It does.
It waters it down. It waters down the honor. Did you make it in the – we're going to have to come up with an inflection point and call it the post-whatever era. Since they started playing 7-on-7, did you make it during that era or did you make it during this era? So, yeah.
Spencer Tillman's here with us hanging out on Radio Row. Peyton Manning is one of those all-time great quarterbacks like we talk about. This Super Bowl to Peyton would mean what for his legacy?
Well, it would be the capper on it for me. I mean, I could walk away from the game if I were him. I just saw Archie walk by here a few minutes ago, and the minute that Denver qualified to make it to the playoffs and then won over the Patriots, after they won that game, he called me up and said, Channel 2, he called me Channel 2. I used to work for the NBC affiliate in Houston. He says, Channel 2, I sure hope it stops after this one. He was just talking about this would be the perfect exclamation point to end it all. It's just a phenomenal talent.
Houston's a fun city, I'll tell you. I was down there this year for the American Athletic Conference Championship game. I did the games for
Houston,
Temple.
Yeah.
Oh, I went to a Rockets game. I went to some ridiculously overpriced restaurant that got comped because I wouldn't pay for that.
Yeah.
I
you remember the name of the restaurant?
No, I don't.
Vic and Anthony's, Tony's.
I think it was Vic and Anthony's.
Vic and Anthony's,
they have like a really good steak, and then they do a lot of fish too, right?
Tillman Fertitta's place. That's a great place. I mean, when you come, look me up. Houston's home for me. You're coming to the Super Bowl next year. Come, we'll take care of you. We'll make sure you get to some place nice.
Do you pay attention to anything they do with the Houston Cougars in the college ranks?
Absolutely. Tom Herman is a great coach, good
Such
friend,
a great coach.
Fantastic. He's in touch with the millennial cohort. I mean, that to me, if Chip Kelly were more like that, I would tolerate him in even a professional context in particular. But when you're in a fiefdom like the NCAA is, you can get away with being the coach that he is. But when you get to the professional ranks, you're dealing with a different animal.
Did you ever realize how appreciative and special it was to be playing in games with guys like a Joe Montana and then going up against John Elway? Did you ever pinch yourself and say, holy crap, I'm playing against some all-time greats?
I mean, I knew it at the time because when I was in the National Football League, I was spending my offseason anchoring, whether it was KPIX in San Francisco or at Houston at KPRC, the NBC affiliate. And I remember sitting back in my chair. This was after I got drafted. I'd been in Houston for a couple of years. And I'm watching Joe Montana do their thing, and I said, that's where I need to be. And I wrote a letter to the 49ers. I wrote a letter to Bill Walsh. Bill Walsh wrote me back and then asked me to come to San Francisco. He says, we know who you are, we know what you're about, and all that stuff. He said, you're in a busy backfield with a bunch of guys running a spread concept, the run and shoot. The bottom line was he invited me to come, and it was mainly because of the leadership more than anything else. I'm a big-time leadership guy, understand human personality and why we do what we do. And he was intrigued by all of that. And as a matter of fact, in the locker room, my position in the locker room was not with the other running backs. I was between Joe Montana and Steve Young. Steve was struggling at the time. And I asked Dr. Harry Edwards, why is my seat here? He says, no, you just be Spencer Tillman, and we'll tell you. And I can tell you the short of it was about 2 months after that, up came Steve Young asking me, how do I do it? And he was referring to the fact that I'm jovial so much every single day. I mean, I'm the same personality all the time. But I was backing up Roger Craig. He wanted to know how to deal with that, and he's backing up a legend. I said, first of all, you're backing up a legend. But that shouldn't have any impact on how you perform and you play every single day. I mean, you have an audience of one, and for me, the son of a missionary, mine was a vertical audience, and that's how I predicated everything I did. And for him, here's a third-generation Mormon. 2 weeks after that, he was going to Bible studies with us and having a blast. That time it's at Brent Jones's apartment. So it was a great time, man. Great time.
Before we let you run, it's so scary now when I watch Flying Out Here, the Stabler piece by Jeremy Schaap.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you have the concussion movie that came out. We talk to Ted Johnson all the time. He's a good friend of the show. Just tell us some of the good work that you're doing and some of the awareness you're trying to bring.
Well, Sarascan has done a fantastic job with their 3D brain imaging. And what it does, that resonant imaging allows you to see in real time the electric flow through the brain when it's actually happening in real time. We've not been able to do that when a player's been concussed. We diagnose after the fact. Or in the unfortunate event, as you just mentioned about with Stabler, after you die, you can open the brain up and see that there was a stage 3 of stage 4's status with him. And then that's unfortunate that you have to die to see that. Well, that's behind us now. With this 3D magnetic imaging, or this type of imaging that they do, it's a little bit different than magnetic imaging. You're able to see the amount of blood flow in the brain, and as a result of that, create a diagnosis or make a diagnosis that leads you to a more specified direct path as far as treatment is concerned. So you can go to cerascan.com, CERESCAN.com, and take a snapshot and a picture of it, and they'll show you the 3D imaging and how it works. It's really impressive, and it's going to have a tremendous impact on not just the diagnosis, but the treatment as well. Doctors will have a clear path to diagnose accurately what's actually taking place in the brain. You don't have to wait any longer till you're dead to figure out what's going on. And I can only imagine if guys like Junior Seau and others who have been concussed at that level, Dave Duerson, my good friend that lost his life. I mean, all those players, Tony Dorsett and others who have been impacted and are being impacted by it. Mike Webster, one of the originals, Seau. It's unfortunate. But Cerascan is doing tremendous work, and they have a chance to change the game with their 3D imaging technology.
I could talk with you all day, but I know you got to run. Thanks
all right,
so much.
my friend. Take care.
There he is, Spencer Tillman, former San Francisco 49er, joining us live on Radio Row. We'll take a quick break, and we'll be right back.